Thanks for coming out. This is actually our 20th year in UX event, so just want to give you guys a round of applause for joining us on this event. It's also our last event of 2019, so we're really glad you want to be here for us this month. We're going to get into the #1 design resolution for 2020. So you guys might be wondering what this is going to be, and this is actually an issue that's come up in years of late in our community and the tech community. So what we want to talk to you about tonight is designing with ethics in mind. So first we'll kind of define what design ethics is. It concerns the moral behavior and responsible choices in the practice of design. Pretty obvious, an easy explanation, but it's more about how we work day-to-day, the processes that we use, the types of features that we produce, and ultimately the moral worth of the products that we're bringing into the world. So basically, what we do as user experience designers every day is kind of hack into the minds of the users that we're designing products for. And with that comes, a powerful understanding of psychology. And really, it's what we do with that information. We can use it for good or we can use it for bad. And, I like this diagram because it begins to explain the implications of the moves that we do in the design of the products that we create, and kind of whether or not those outcomes are ultimately ethical, unethical, and our responsibility ultimately as designers. So an outcome could be something as simple as a user converts or makes a purchase or clicks a link, subscribes to your product. And then this portion right here, these are the actual design moves that we're consciously making as designers. But there are always unintended consequences that can be predictable or not predictable, and it raises a lot of questions on whether they're ethical or unethical, and whether we're ultimately responsible for not considering those things from the get-go. So as UX designers, we're always kind of struggling with these two forces, which are the business goals of the companies we're working with or working for, and the goals of our end users. And a lot of the times, it's pushed in this direction, right? These companies have various metrics that they're trying to achieve in the products that we're designing for them.
As a consultancy, we deal with this quite a bit, right? We have clients that have obvious needs, and I'm sure a number of you have bosses that you answer to, who have bosses that they have to answer to, who need to make money. So we often have to deal with a lot of different business goals that weigh on us as designers. 4 easy ones are up here on the screen, but there's, of course, many of these things that are being considered all the time. So we're going to start by looking at what you might know as dark patterns. You're probably familiar with a number of these. These are obviously things that are unethical, but they are results of decisions that are being made to meet business goals in intentional ways. So that is what we classify as a dark pattern. The first one that we'll take a look at, trick questions. Nothing groundbreaking here. I'm sure you've seen a number of these. But this one in particular, it's using terminology to mess with you. Letting you sit here and delay. Maybe you just give up and get out. They start to get quite complicated, right? There are things that can be sort of double, triple negatives involved here. Confusing sentences, using crappy grammar. UX writing. Others like this one. What exactly am I canceling or continuing? The way in which you're using these words can be quite confusing. There's also some UX convention here as well. Cancel on the right, continue on the left. No hierarchy amongst the levels. Another one that I know we've all dealt with at this point in life, speaking to the basket. And a lot of these things can seem quite elementary on the surface, right? But in the context of this particular example with Delta, if I'm an existing Delta member that has a card already on file, I go to check into a flight, if you want to rush, This defaults to opting into first class for $170. It's also putting the primary button in the red button, right? Convention or data will also tell you that that red button converts better than any other button color possible. So who knows if I'm likely to opt out of that or not. U-Haul's a good one too. I don't know if you've ever moved. I've done it quite a bit. When you go to rent a truck from U-Haul, there's a lot of preset add to carts here. Things that you think actually, hey, maybe that's useful on the way along. But they're also burying buttons to get you out of these things. You'll notice in the upper right, as this moves along, the actual way for you to get out of opting into these services and these add-on pieces of equipment is very hidden, it's very subtle. It's not a conventional place. You almost actually end up scrolling the page a number of times before you can actually get out of these things.
All right, the next one we're going to talk about is the Roach Motel. So this is something that's very easy to kind of get into, but very difficult to get out of. So here's an example from stamps.com, right? They don't have a digital means for you to actually opt out of their service and cancel or delete your account. So they're requiring you to take extra steps, increasing the friction, requiring you to have a call with them, and kind of ultimately frustrating you to the point where you might not even cancel it all and they would keep your business. Or in this case, where there's literally no way to sign out of an account and you have to literally delete and reinstall the app if you want to switch accounts. Or these few examples where they're hiding the way out intentionally for both our eyes as humans and for bots. In this case, the tools that we're using to help unsubscribe from different services. Down here, you'll see they've actually made that an image as opposed to text. So things like Gmail can actually recognize it as an unsubscribed link. Or requiring another phone call to change your plan and walk through the process, in which case a lot of times these business models are set up to try to upsell you or convince you to remain on as a customer via that phone call. The next one is named after Mark Zuckerberg. It's called privacy Zuckering. It's when you unintentionally or unknowingly give up a lot of your user data when using a product or service. Obviously, this has become a huge issue as of late in the trials. Well, not trials, but with Facebook and the scandals that they're going through, and it's coming to light the business models that a lot of these companies are using to provide what seemed like a great free service for users. In reality, there's all of these exchanges of funds behind the scenes based on your user information. This example, this is for downloading a game. It's a mobile app. You can see they're requiring all of these things, including your identity, to download this application. They're also using a very quick way to accept that so that you'll potentially just gloss over all of that on your way to downloading and playing that game. It's way too much information. Other examples that we see are where you agree with third parties' terms of service when you opt into the first service that you're intending to, in which, in this case, you have to go to that company's privacy policy and review it in order to come back and opt in. It's much easier and kind of our human nature to just accept and continue that, and nobody ever reads the terms and conditions. Or in this case of LinkedIn, where from a UX perspective, you think that this is a required step. It has a step indicator. It pops up in sequence in this specific onboarding flow, and they're hiding the option to skip this step, and they're relying on convention that the continue button is the most common button that we're going to press. It's the boldest color. It's just generally what we would draw our eyes to, but kind of hidden underneath that is that we're going to import your address book, suggest connections, and help you manage your contacts. So they're going to take a lot of personal information from you in this process in order to meet their own business goals of growing via network effect.
So other ones like price comparison prevention. things that we almost expect in the world of e-commerce today, are things that people like to vary as well. Sort of putting the blinders on you, preventing you from being able to shop around as you might wish. Another airline example here, British Airways. You're viewing flights for that current day, but you can't see flights that are directly adjacent, let alone the prices for the flight you're actually booking. So you do all that searching, you get to this point, you make a commitment, who's going to go back at that point. Maybe the next day is what you. Not to pick on LinkedIn, but another LinkedIn example is LinkedIn Premium. I don't know who's signed up for this, but I have. And I made sure to set a calendar reminder to cancel that shit. Because you get screens like this. It's like, rather than saying entry, better, best, and pro or something to even give you the slightest inclination of what you're signing up for, these are just kind of random terms: career, business, sales, and hiring. But they are great. And what you're signing up for here is a free month, but with the promise to pay after that, which touches on a future one, but kind of crappy nature here. A similar one, which is actually just confusing. It's using almost a graphic convention that we see with typical SaaS products, enterprise solutions, where it's kind of picking something that seems like an obvious choice because of savings and kind of middle tier, must be good, but not best and not the worst. But in fact, the pricing here is actually the same across all of them. There is no savings to be had of 1980. It's a quite random poll of hey, this is a good solution for you. A simple one that you could argue is being made for an aesthetic decision, hiding the numbers on the screen and focusing on the product at hand. But at the same time, again, you're making a commitment to an item here, right? There's a lot of similar looking jewelry. I like this one best. It's in my cart. Screw it. I'm not going to go back and look for a cheap one. Maybe there isn't a cheaper one. How can I tell? Another common one, misdirection. The styles of these things are obvious, but the ways in which these things pop up in our daily lives are sometimes even more than an example is you probably all come across. You accidentally click on an ad, maybe you can't even find the X button, let alone click on it with your fat thumbs. Next thing you know, you're in the App Store. Shit, I went from Safari to the App Store that fast. I was reading that. Or maybe it times up, right? Ad pops up in front of you. Or maybe you're casually scrolling your favorite social feed. What is that hair doing on my screen? Can I swipe that off? So now you're on the website. That ad got you. And I would say that's actually some pretty intelligent design. Holy shit, what a dark path. Unethical. You got God, and every time you got God too. This is one that shows up quite a bit. You know, kind of the next and back buttons. This is London Zoo, I think. The next button, or seemingly next button, is I'm opting in to make a donation, which it's for a zoo, wouldn't be the worst idea. At the same time, maybe they didn't even tell you what the ticket price was beforehand, so if you quickly make it to the next screen, you've just upped your ticket price without knowing. You get a total rather than an itemized list. Oops.
And you know, this is conventionally a back button to go back a step, but this actually continues forward without the donation, which might have been what you actually wanted to do. So the next one is hidden costs. I'm sure we've all come across something like this, where you've done all the work, you've found the best condo you can find in Hawaii, you plugged in how many nights, and then all of a sudden you see in reality with the cleaning fee, service fee, and tax that it's way more than you were ever willing to spend. But at that point, they're kind of pulling on our psychology. We've already invested our time, we've invested, you know, kind of building up this expectation around maybe this trip that we're going on. And at that point, you're way more likely to commit because we don't want to have to go back and have to redo all that work. Or GoDaddy's kind of notorious for this. So they're coming from a position of authority by providing all of these bundles and recommendations and things you should do, because a lot of their user base might not necessarily know how domain purchasing really works. They're also minimizing what the actual price of that domain will be after a couple of years. I think it's 2 years in the fine print, or when you register for 2 years, you get this price for the first year, and then it goes up to $14.99. That's a common tactic that we see out there. That's very much a dark net.
It's almost like a digital info ad. Right? It's like, act now and get it for this. But wait, there's more.
So the bait and switch, it's where you've taken an action and you think that you're confirming it, and the company makes a last-ditch effort to trick you into doing what they want. So this comes from an unsubscribe email, and you've already clicked that link thinking that you're just going to confirm the unsubscribe, but again, they're doing a little bit of misdirection with this one as well. And no cancel actually does not subscribe you, and they're providing this secondary link to actually unsubscribe from. Or here, where our gut would say, click this button, this is going to do what we intended it to do, but in fact, continue is the secondary option under your account. And LinkedIn, again, is doing a very similar convention where the prominent button, the rightmost button, is in fact a stay premium instead of confirm cancellation. Or in this case, just building on frustration where you try to click this to not receive emails, and that actually goes to a broken link, so you become frustrated that you can't actually do it. In fact, there's this very, very subtle link just below it to kind of get around regulations, and that actually functions as unsubscribe.
So confirm shaming is a bit of a newer one that's a part of this. These are things that play on our emotions, societal pressures and things like that. The first one here seems fun, right? At the same time, it certainly has like these undertones of almost fear mongering, right? Well, maybe I should think twice. Maybe I will click on it. Another one that's kind of cute and cuddly, right? At the same time, no, I'm a bad person. Kind of like anxiety driven, right? And I would say more of a societal one here. I'll take the soup. But, come on.
Trying to make you feel less sophisticated.
Right, exactly. Disguised ads, definitely not something we're unfamiliar with. But I would say that these are getting more advanced. And creep into your feeds or your articles and things like that in more subtle ways. This is obviously a web page. At the same time, this still happens quite a bit. And if you're a designer that ever just tried to download a free icon, you've probably clicked on the wrong download link several times. But things that are getting a bit better. This is actually an ad, this article that is in Business Insider. And if you're familiar with this service and you haven't clicked on an ad intentionally, maybe you click next or something, this was a sponsored article for you to click on next. It's a little bit harder to discern that these things are and it's playing on your familiarity with the service or the platform. Similar type of thing here, leveraging the UI to say, well, we told you it was an ad, but it's being placed in the very obvious place, right? Next to what you're used to of the UI. Force continuity, we saw a couple of these previously, but these are things that are really requiring you to take action to continue to where you're trying to go. We're not immediately reminding you that the subscription is what you're signing up for. This has been a problem in the recent past for Apple. They brought in some ad aspects of the App Store. They look very similar to any other normal app listing, but you were actually committing to signing up for $99 a month kind of thing. Some of them are worse than others. This one is by week. It's $45 a week. But advertised as a free app because it's free for 3 days. Another one that might be a bit harder to see here, but the option here is defaulting to actually the most expensive option. But in reality, it's being posed to you as the cheapest because it's a monthly subscription for $15, whereas you can sign up for the year for 110 or something like that. So similar. But all of these things are dark patterns because they are intentional, they are unethical, and they were a choice by the designer. Whereas we'll look at a number of things coming up here that aren't as intended per se, or if they are, they were done unethically.
So back to our diagram about business goals and user goals. What we generally consider to be some of the best user experiences are where we see the kind of balance between these two factors. But as we'll see in some other examples, it's not always so easy to understand if that really is ethical or unethical, because there are a lot of unintended outcomes in the products that are being designed today that there could be some debate about whether or not they're ethical and ultimately who's responsible for that. So this is an interesting concept. The ludic loop basically dangles these rewards or carrots in front of their users, and in order to continue or to motivate them to do specific things that they want to. So this was kind of popularized after the game Tetris, because as soon as one problem is solved, a new block comes down the screen waiting for you to kind of position it into place, creating these extremely addictive behaviors. So Uber is notorious for doing this. They're giving these milestones like $30 in 3 hours and telling you how close you are when you try to clock out for the night. Ultimately, this is unethical because a lot of the drivers are staying up extremely late or working 16-hour shifts because they're trying to continuously meet these goals that are being posted in the app. And ethics is ultimately a subjective thing. When we look at an app like Waze, you could think that it's generally positive for both the user and the company to provide these in-app alerts and notifications when maybe a cop is nearby so you can avoid that speeding ticket. But a lot of users were sending comments and pinpointing DUI checkpoints. So we have to think, like, is that really a good user experience? Because at the end of the day, that's unsafe for all people involved and raises a lot of questions about what is actually ethical in product design. But a good example of hacking user behavior in a positive way is an app like Acorns. So they take your spare change from purchases and from specific merchants and invest it for you in a retirement account or a stock portfolio. And they're hacking our sort of human tendencies to kind of set it and forget it. Like, we would never be investing 36 cents a day or in multiple instances like this. But with this app, it kind of does it for you automatically in generally a positive outcome. But at the same time, it's developing these addictive behaviors of checking in after a purchase or spending more at different vendors because you're getting that cash back.
So look at some examples now of intended ethical and as a result, the only praiseworthy actions on the part of us. This one is kind of in contrast to the forced continuity example. We've got Netflix actually sends you a warning when you start the trial. Okay, your trial's gonna run out, you're about to start paying. Criticism would be that there's exactly a link to go cancel instead of to go watch more content. But at least there's an attempt here to make you aware that you're about to start paying. Hopefully that was really clear prior to getting this email as well. I would say that Pinterest does a decent job of this too. Within the UI, sort of pins, or you can call them that, are clearly displayed or articulated as ads in the UI, in contrast to the normal pins that you see. The link is also called out there that you're going to be taken somewhere else rather than staying on the website. Strava is a good example of this too. On the right-hand side, on the left screen, there's actually a call out for you to take action on your data settings. So it calls you out there. The next screen in on the right, the privacy controls, is where you can actually affect what data they do or don't get from you while you're using the app. If you get a little bit deeper, it actually tells you what your data is being used for. Kind of a novel way to do this actually, but something that people are very appreciative of. Strava doesn't make some money off that data, but at least it's giving you the opportunity to, hey, I don't want you to have it, or I don't care because there is some benefit to you making money off my data as well. They actually use that to help improve how people move about cities. So it goes to urban areas most often. There's also some logic behind when you have really good product market fit, you probably don't need to lean on dark patterns to get people to do what you're trying to do. So something like SkyTracker here is offering you what you're really looking for. How do I get to the place that I'm going to cheapest, quickest? Go with the third one. I think it's best. Best. Fastest, cheapest, best. What best means, I don't know. But it is using a utility, right? A service that we're looking for. It's not necessarily novel anymore. Kayak does this, and other services do as well. But it is something that has a very obvious utility. People use it and like it. They don't have to bury ads within their listings or get you commit to things that you really want to.
So we've just gone through a lot of examples of good and bad user experiences and how they relate to ethics. But now we'll get into some of the questions that we should start to ask ourselves in 2020. The first would be, are we following any sort of code of ethics? And that's something that we might think about often. This article, The Designer's Code of Ethics by Mike Montero, is a really good place, I think, to start. And there's several different articles about what you can start to think about in developing design processes. And I think it's not so much about telling you what to do, but understanding and raising these questions in the first place to get us starting to think about and talk about these issues. The next would be, do we have our own set of personal design principles, values, and philosophies? A lot of the times when we start working for these companies or with these companies, our values are based on their values. They might not necessarily be rooted in what we truly believe in as designers. So starting to consider and jot down what you actually believe in the work that you do is really important. Tagging on to that is, are we designing mindfully? A lot of the products that we see have developed these incredibly addictive behaviors that have us checking our phones every few minutes compulsively. So thinking about how we can start to reduce friction, create a more sort of peaceful environment for us to interact with digital experiences. And something we might not think about, but as product designers, we have a lot of influence on the actual business models that are coming to light out of all these things. So starting to think about, is our business model even fair to all parties? We've looked at several examples where you could argue that it isn't. In the case of Uber, where for their riders it's great, but for a lot of the drivers we see some tension in that community. And I really like this one. It's, have we tested for abusability? So if we look back at this chart that we've been talking about, sometimes there are unintended outcomes that are not predictable but are unethical. And in this argument, designers are actually at fault because we're supposed to be thinking critically about these things and stress testing them against abusability. So if you haven't already, I would consider starting to think about all the ways that people could use your products for potentially negative outcomes and trying to design solutions for that. And finally, are we building diverse and inclusive teams and cultures? I think this really ties into design ethics because, again, it is a really subjective thing. When we bring various perspectives into the conversation, we can start to figure out what directions to take in what we're designing and not just be biased into one group's opinions or way of doing things. And I just want to share one example of a project that we're working on with a company from San Francisco called Stellaris. They're a startup in the job recruiting space, focused on removing the bias from job recruiting. So essentially the way that it works is talent signs up, they do an onboarding, and then they put in all their skills, experiences, typical resume type stuff. But on the recruitment side, they're basically served 5 candidates a month for a specific job, the ones that are the best match. And when they pop up in their dashboard, they're not seeing the person's face, name, there's no understanding of their race or of their gender. It's just how their unique skills and cultural aspects fit into the team and ultimately the company that they're going to be working for. So this is just an example of what a few candidates for a specific engineering position might look like. If we dive a little deeper, there's this toggle between skills and challenges for that talent, and it's kind of hard to see, but there's a variety of different aspects, like what the talent wants out of this job, the matching of various experience that they've done, how they fit into that team, and then ultimately their kind of overall story. But in this case, it's balancing the unique requirements of that position, with how that candidate fits in. And we're starting to take this a little bit further in on the recruitment side, in providing a lot of context for them to make these decisions or understand why someone might not specifically be fitting into their needs, but they might have some adjacent skills, right? So in this example, they have a skill that's similar and actually uses this as a building block. So instead of just disqualifying them because they haven't listed that specific skill on the resume, it's smart enough to understand, okay, they know this technology, so we're gonna guess that they're relatively competent in this other technology. And then providing even more context for recruiters, so understanding what kind of skills and expertise they've used, and pairing that with the company that they worked at and the engineering strength of that team. Just giving them more information on the skills that they used in the environment that they used. And then when we rate things and rank things, we're providing the information that tells them what that actually means. So if someone's a guru, this pop-up actually tells them specifically what that means, all the way down to that they're just familiar with the technology. And that wraps up our presentation for today. So thank you guys. And just one more thing, we're really grateful for everyone coming out and being with us all year long here in San Francisco. If you do appreciate what we're doing here and the kind of community that we're building or have worked with us before, I really would love if you guys could review our company on Google, and I'll leave that up there for a little bit after, just in case anyone wants to do so. And our group is over 1,100 members now, so we're really excited to see what next year holds. Thanks, guys.
I'll move a mic around if people have questions. I'll make you take that first.
With regard to dark patterns, a lot of the times us as designers can be very, we can express like, hey, this is not legit or not fair or whatever. On what level do you think the managing body is sort of overruling that and directing that to happen?
I think it depends. There's a fine balance that you need to strike between really upsetting your users and then on the other hand trying to build advocates of your product. If you're not doing these negative things, these dark patterns, people are going to be way more willing to use your service. Dark patterns are kind of a cop-out, and there's a lot of short-term gain for the company, but in the long term, it's not going to work out for them.
It's a balance like a lot of other things. When we deal with that kind of stuff, you have to be conscious about why you're trying to solve for that as a designer versus the business side of things.
Right.
It has a lot to do with how you present your response as a designer to that solution that might not necessarily meet what a client asked you to do in the first place. Right. Why did you make that choice to solve that? Push comes to shove, we also live in a cancel culture these days too. So you screw up too many times. So
Right. I totally identified with the U-Haul.
Yeah.
And they do literally make it hard for you to say no to the dolly and the extra bundle of reps. But at one level, does the designer go, this is kind of not right?
Yeah, I mean, speak up. There's a big role that designers play in these things too. You shouldn't view yourself as just a piece of the wheel. Believe it or not, you're actively participating in those business choices too. So thinking critically about the decisions that are being made. If the thing on the roadmap is, hey, we need to sell more cardboard boxes, there's probably a better way to sell those boxes than just to bury it in the checkout flow.
Cool, thank you.
Question for the room, I guess, too. with UX design, is there a place for dealing with the problems with free speech on platforms and kind of like that line that starts to get blurred with people abusing the space? And where does design stand for that?
You first.
I think it's a really good question that the whole design community is sort of struggling with now. Not just the design community, but the people ultimately responsible for bringing these platforms into the world. And I don't feel qualified to answer that question.
It is tough, right? That's pretty loaded.
Yeah.
There's lots of considerations there, right? Not even just business and design choices, but legal questions. And how those things start to evolve, I wouldn't pretend to know.
Yeah.
I think there are ways in which that you have to be conscious, at least, that that's a potential thing that's going to happen. It's kind of the abusability piece. It's like, do we just throw this up and see what happens? Or do we try to build something in as a way to mitigate these potential risks? We've had some products where we have like news feeds or forums and things like that. At the most minimum viable piece of incorporation is a way to have users be able to flag that. So if someone sees that and finds it offensive or something, they can report it. Maybe there's ways in which you automatically trigger that to be taken down. If one user says, hey, this offends the shit out of me, and the next person says the same thing, you probably take that. You don't need like some HR team somewhere to take it down. You always put it back.
Does anyone else want to potentially answer that question?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Or other questions.
I had a dark morning on YouTube, so I was dealing with those feelings. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very tough.
Yeah.
Well, bye.
My question relates to how do you push back when you have a client who's asking for inclusion explicitly for a dark pattern? If you find yourself in complete control of the process, maybe you present a solution at the end, you can try and be ethical about it, you can try and present it obviously. Sometimes it's not possible, sometimes it's explicitly requested, hey, this needs to go in the cart with your purchase. Do you have any tools or tactics or methods for pushing back, or at least being transparent with your client for their products?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you always have to respond with yes when you're given a directive. Like, your company's not just hiring you to do the design work, they're hiring you to consult for them and to kind of express your opinions and unique opinion coming from the side of design. And if we know that these things are going to ultimately just incredibly frustrate our customers or lead to other drop-off rates in other areas, then I think you could make the argument that, yes, that might work for a little while, but ultimately it's not going to result in a lasting customer. I think in the end, it would outweigh the potential benefits of just having this quick wins.
Yeah, part of one of the things that Matt mentioned before is, are we operating ourselves with code of ethics? You don't always have to say yes. It's also part of like, is it good to always do the U-Haul thing? No. And are there ways to get around that? When you're a designer, like your client or something, you probably don't want to tell them no right off the bat on the first request. So where you can try to mitigate that, maybe graphical things or something. Trying to kill U-Haul here, but that auto adds a bunch of boxes to your cart, maybe there's a way to really call that out explicitly. This is how you can get rid of it. Making this up as we go, but I think it's more important to say, are we operating ourselves with ethics? When do I have to say no? When do I need to move on? There aren't any other ones. We'll be around too, so you can always find us in those questions too. But thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So we are going to be doing a portfolio review for those of you who brought them. We're probably going to set up a few different stations in this area over here. They might have already set those up, I'm not sure, but I think I'll check in with Michelle and we'll get that started, and the rest of us can just continue to drink beers and do what's left over.
So we'll chime in with directions if we need to for that. But thanks, guys.
Thanks.